Hi everyone, it's Carissa at Sprinkled with Glitter, and I am here with a couple of card projects for you today. The first one, I'm going to be using these nesting tags dies from We Are Memory Keepers, and they're kind of cool because they don't actually have the hole built in them. They have two little separate dies that you kind of slide up into that slot, and that creates your hole. Now, one of them is a little bit closer to the top of the tag than the other, so that's the difference between the two, but I thought these were really cool tags to kind of have in your stash. The other dies I'm going to be using are the nesting circles dies and also these icons, the Albums Made Easy icons by We Are Memory Keepers. And I'm going to be using the little typewriter and the little heart for my particular card project. So to start out, I want to cut this tag. This is kind of one of the medium-sized tags out of some pattern paper. I'm going to be using this little scrap of gray cardstock. And I want to make this tag a little longer than what it actually is, so I'm going to show you how to do kind of some partial die cutting. But first, before I do that, I want to create a hinge in the top of this paper, and so I just kind of trimmed off the piece I didn't need, and then right across the top, I'm just going to score it about 1/2 inch, and this is going to create my hinge, and I'll just fold that down, and then when I go to cut my tag, I want to make sure that I don't cut through that hinge that I've made at the top. So I'm going to line up the tag, and you can see that the way I'm going to place this, the top blade of that die is not going to cut through. So the paper is just below the top blade of that die. And in order to keep this from kind of shifting around, I've just put a little bit of Post-it tape on that so that when I run it through my die cut machine, I don't accidentally shift anything and then cut the part that I don't want to cut. So I'm using a magnetic platform by Sizzix with my Evolution, and I wanted to use the clear plate so that you could see what I was doing. So I'm just putting this die, and remember that top blade does not cut through that fold that I've created, and I'm leaving the bottom part hanging out of the plates, so that way the bottom part isn't going to cut either. So now that I've run this through, you can see that I didn't cut through on the bottom, but I'm just going to shift this down, and I'm going to kind of line it up to where the edges of the die are in line with the edges that I've already cut, and then I'm going to tape it back down again, and I'm going to run this through once again, but this time instead of not cutting the bottom, I'm going to not cut the top. So you'll see here when I place this between my plates, I've left the top part of the die just hanging out of those plates, and then I can run it through my die cut machine. So right there is where you can see that the top part is not going to cut. Only the sides and the bottom are going to cut because that's what's between the plates. So I'll just run that through my die cut machine, and you can see here I have my finished tag that's a little bit longer than what it normally would be, and it has that nice hinge at the top, which is going to create the fold of our card eventually. Now, I realized that after I cut this, I forgot to cut my hole in there. So I'm just lining this up, and I'm going to run it through my die cut machine again. I just put a little piece of Post-it tape, and then that way I can just cut my hole out of my tag. Now, you don't actually have to cut a hole in your tag, but I think it looks more like a tag if you actually cut the hole. So that's why I cut it. Now, while I have my die cut machine out on my table, I'm just going to cut my little typewriter and my heart as well. So I have a little Pool Party Stampin' Up! Cardstock to cut the typewriter and a little Real Red cardstock to cut the heart out of. And while I'm running all this through also, I'm going to take a piece of textured gray paper from We Are Memory Keepers and cut out a circle using the nesting circles die. And then finally, this little die is kind of neat. It has a place that will emboss as well. So I'm going to show you how to add a deeper emboss to this. I'm just using my Genius platform, and I've placed that die with the paper in it, blade side up. And then I have this little silicone mat. Now this actually came with my Genius platform, and I'm also sliding in the B, which is the embossing mat that you would use if you were using embossing folders with your Genius platform. Now you can do this with the Sizzix as well. You do need a silicone mat, and your sandwich is going to be just like you would do an embossing folder as well. So now that I have that all embossed and I have all my pieces cut, I'm ready to kind of start embellishing, start kind of laying this out how I think I want it. And then this is where I decided that I wanted a little bit more definition to the embossed part of the typewriter. So I slipped it right back into the die. It just nestles right in there. And I'm going to bring in my craft mat, and I'm going to bring in a little bit of some coordinating ink. So this is Pool Party ink by Stampin' Up. And I'm just going to take a sponge and sponge right over that. Now my die is acting as a mask, so the only place I'm going to get this ink is where it opens up for the embossing parts. And so this makes just a little more definition on those pieces, gives it a little bit of depth. And I really just think that this was better in the end because I got that. You could really see the embossing. Have that all done, let's start working on the card. I'm going to think about how I kind of want this laid out. So I know that the tag is going to create kind of my card front. It's going to be the hinge that opens up. And this is how I think I want to lay it all out. Now, I thought it would be fun to kind of have a piece of paper coming out of the top of this typewriter like it was actually a typewriter. And so I'm taking my craft knife and I'm just cutting a slit in the top of that typewriter. Now there's a little place where it shows where the paper is kind of coming out, so it was really easy to figure out where to cut this. And if you've watched any of my past videos, you know that my craft knife was kind of on the fritz. So I do have a new one, so don't worry about me. I'm good with my craft knife now. So you can see I just cut a piece of scrap white cardstock there, and now I have this sans serif alphabet stamp set by Martha Stewart. It's something that I've had in my collection. I think I picked it up on clearance for quite some time, and I'm just going to grab the X and the O stamps out of there because I'm going to stamp XOX. Now I didn't have room for XOXO, so it's just going to be XOX, and I'm just using a little Memento Tuxedo black ink to do that. Now I didn't mount them all on the block together because I couldn't get them close enough. So I have my X on one side and my O on the other, and I'm just stamping them individually on that. And they didn't perfectly line up, but I'm okay with that. So now I'm just going to add a little bit of foam adhesive to the back of that typewriter. It's going to keep my paper in place where I want it, and eventually that's how I'm going to adhere it to that circle piece there. But I wanted to add a sentiment on the bottom of the circle, and I want to kind of curve it in the shape of the circle. I have this paper tray ink. This is Heart to Heart number 4, I believe. It's a mini stamp set, and I have all the products linked in my YouTube description as well as over at my blog. So I'm just taking my stamp block and I have it face up, and I just kind of curved that clear stamp to match the curve of my circle. And then I use my VersaFine Black Onyx ink. This is my favorite black ink to stamp that down, and that just says just wanted to say, and then I'm going to stamp the hello separately. The hello is kind of scripty and it's a little bit chunkier, so it was kind of a little bit more difficult to get to match in the shape of that circle, but I think it worked out just fine. And so I inked that up in the VersaFine ink as well, and I'm going to stamp that along the bottom of the circle. Now the nice thing about the circle is if I don't get it directly in the center, it's okay, I can turn the circle. If you're working with a square, it wouldn't work that way. So this worked in my favor. Now I'm going to start putting together the card front. So I'm just adding adhesive, just some regular tape runner adhesive to that flap that I created on the tag when I made the tag. And I'm just going to push that down onto the back of a piece of white cardstock. So that cardstock is going to act as the place where I'm going to write my message. Now it's time to adhere the circle, and once again just using a little tape runner adhesive to adhere that circle, and I only put tape runner on half of that circle, just the half that would be stuck to the tag. And I went ahead and adhered my typewriter with a double layer of foam adhesive, and then I used foam adhesive to adhere my heart kind of sticking out behind that typewriter as well. Now I wanted to add some twine to this, but just because of the way the card is, I couldn't really loop it through. So I just took a little bit of, this is just some regular string, I cut a piece, I tied a knot in it, and I'm just going to adhere it with some of this multi-medium in the matte finish just to the top of that tag. So it kind of looks like it's tied on there, but it's not really. So I'm kind of tricking everybody. And then I just tied that into a knot at the top and trimmed it down. And that completes my card. You can see I added a few enamel dots to the front of the card as well, just to add a little bit more color. And you can see that when this card is done, this creates a really fun little hinged card, and you can open that up and write your sentiment inside. Now, this card was done, but I was looking at it and I thought it just needed a little something else. So I'm using this glaze pen by Sakura. And I'm just adding a little bit of black glaze ink to the keys and to the space bar. And I thought that just made it pop so much more. And it's got a really shiny effect, so it was lots of fun. So that completes my first card, and now it's time to work on a second card. Now this one's also going to be a hinged die cut card, but I'm going to do it in kind of a gatefold way. So I'm flipping through this Hip Hip Hooray pad from We Are Memory Keepers, and I'm just finding a couple pieces of pattern paper that I think go well together and that I can use to cut these balloons out of. So in the end, I settled on this yellow piece and also this kind of aqua dot piece. Now, I don't have to be so careful when I cut these, so that's the way I'm doing this card is a little bit different. I have the nesting balloon die and my Genius platform, and I've put it blade side up, and I'm going to cut both pieces of pattern paper at once. So I'm just going to place my pattern paper right over that face down, and then I'm going to use my A plate that came with my Genius platform and run it through my evolution. Now I'm creating my hinge or my fold after I cut these on this card, so I don't have to be careful where the blade is lining up. And that's just because these are a little bit bigger and I had a little bit more wiggle room. So I've arranged these onto a white piece of paper. It's cut to 4 by 5 1/4. And I'm kind of looking at how I want them arranged. And once I get them where I want them, I'm going to use a piece of Post-it tape to kind of keep them secured down. And then I'm going to flip the whole thing over, and using the stylus that I just used to create scores on my card bases, I'm just going to score down the sides of those balloons. And that will give me a mark where I can score those and create the hinges. Now, I went over it a couple of times just to make sure I got it really good. And then while I had it adhered down, I just took a pair of scissors and cut off the top of that yellow balloon. Now, you could leave it hanging over the edge if you wanted to, but then it wouldn't fit in an envelope. So that's why I went ahead and trimmed it down. Once I've got them scored and kind of trimmed down the way I want them, I can remove that Post-it tape, and then I can just create my fold. Now I've already scored them, so it's really nice and easy. I just fold it back, and then I can just use my bone folder to make a really nice crease on those balloons. So now, just as before, on the hinge part of those die cuts, I'm going to just put a little tape runner adhesive and wrap them around to the back of that white piece of paper. And you can see here that that creates a really nice gatefold opening card. And just a really different way. I think it would be fun to do these in different shaped balloons as well. But that's for another card. So now I'm just going to add a little twine. Now this twine is kind of a natural colored twine with a little bit of silver in it, and I just thought that would be fun. And I'm just tying it in knots around the bottom. And then I'm going to take this whole piece of white cardstock, and I'm going to layer it onto a piece of the gray textured cardstock. It's the same one that I cut the circle out of for the previous card, and it just hides the back of the white piece where all those die cuts are kind of hanging over. So I thought it would be fun to create some loops in the twine. So I'm just using a little bit of multi-matte medium, and I'm just kind of shaping the twine. I'm not putting it all along the twine. I'm just adhering it kind of up into the balloon. And once I get them where I want, then I'm just going to take a block and just place those over and just give a few minutes to dry. So you can see there, I've just created a couple loops in the balloon, and then I'm going to let the rest kind of hang free. Now it's time to create my sentiment piece, and I'm going to make kind of a belly band for this to keep those balloons down and closed. So I have a piece of vellum here, and I've gone ahead and prepared it with my EK Success powder tool, and I'm just stamping the Celebrate sentiment. This is from Paper Tray ink as well, and some Versamark ink onto that vellum piece, and then I'm going to coat it in some yellow. That is silver embossing powder, and then I'm going to let my heat tool heat up and then heat emboss that greeting. Now, you'll notice that I stamped that greeting right along the bottom of that full sheet of vellum. I need it to be able to wrap around the card, and also it's going to make trimming this out a little bit easier. So now I just use the wire guide of my trimmer to cut that into a long strip, and I put that as close to center on that piece of vellum as I can. And now I just am going to wrap this around. This is going to act as a belly band, kind of holding those balloons closed. So I'm just kind of placing it in the center and then wrapping it around and giving it a nice crease. And then I'll just add a little tape runner adhesive to just the very tip of that and wrap it around to close it up. Now, I'm not sure how you would hide the adhesive on this particular piece, but it didn't bother me too much. It's really not that noticeable. I thought it would be fun to add just a few little sequins to the card front. So I'm just using some silver sequins from Studio Calico and my quick stick tool, and I'm just squeezing up a little bit of more of that green goo to grab those sequins. And I'm dipping them in the multi-matte medium and just placing them onto the front of the card. And you can see there that completes my card. I have the little belly band and a little gatefold opening card here. Just something a little bit fun and a little different that you can do really with any shape of die cuts that you want. So here's a look back at the two card projects I created today, just using some die cuts and creating little hinges on them to create some fun folds on your card, something a little different and unexpected. I hope you'll try this with a variety of shapes that you have in your collection. As always, I've linked all the supplies used in these projects in the description at YouTube, as well as over at my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you do, I hope you'll give it a thumbs up and subscribe. Thanks for watching. I hope you have a fabulous day.